Americans are divided over many issues, including the so-called refugee crisis. A recent USA Today article did a poll and they found that 51%, almost exactly half of Americans, could agree with this statement, that they still believe the United States should welcome immigrants fleeing violence and persecution in their home countries. And they report that that number is actually down from 2017 when it was 56%. So look, it's not a big surprise that Americans disagree on an issue, especially such a big socio-political issue. But the real question, the question that I want us to look at today is, how should we as Christians respond to this global crisis when it comes to our cities and to our towns and our villages? So welcome. My name is Shaun LePage. I'm the Ministry Studies Chair and Professor at Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm one of your hosts for this forum, which is called Calvary Conversations. My guest today is Mr. Rich Casebolt. And I can't think of anyone, I personally don't know anyone who is more qualified to talk about this refugee crisis and how the church, how Christians should respond to it than Rich Casebolt. So, Rich, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your time.
Hey, it's great to be here, Shaun. Thanks for having me on today.
My pleasure. So let me introduce you here. So first of all, I think you were voted like one of the top 10 most awesome people in Kansas City, right? Did I read that somewhere?
Well, I think that honor might go to my wife, but yeah, if that happened, yeah, let me know. I didn't even know there was the runnings for it. I might not have dropped my name into that hat.
Yeah, well, you answered exactly right. Your wife should get that. But so Rich came to Kansas City in 1999 to get an MDiv from Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. We won't hold that against you, Rich. And you actually married another MDiv student, right, Vicky?
And, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And she was not there to get her MRS degree. She probably just wants me to make everybody sure everybody knows that. She was picking up her MDiv, and she did get that, even though her MRS degree came first. But
yeah. Well, that happens, at these, especially these Christian schools. So
crazy.
Rich and Vicky have 4 children: Caleb, Keenan, Chloe, and Christian. And so together they served in collegiate ministry. I assume this was before the kids came along. They served in collegiate ministry, discipleship, and church planting in central, southern, and northeastern Thailand from 2005 to 2011. Then they returned to Kansas City in January of 2011 and served in, and I got this is a quote from your bio, a grassroots role of missionary to the nations dispersed throughout the Kansas City metro area. That's a great title for a vocation. So basically, what happened here was that Rich and Vicky and others started RefugeKC, which is half of what I want to talk about today, or definitely very much associated with the primary conversation, and that is about the need, the issue, the crisis, I would call it the opportunity of refugees in our midst. And so RefugeKC was founded to address that need. All right, what have I left out here, Rich?
Yeah, well, tying into Calvary, so we did start this ministry in the basement of Elias Coffee House and Ministry, started by Dan and Wendy Smith. That was really my re-entry into the United States, into ministry. My first entry into the historic Northeast, the kind of the urban core of Kansas City, what was through Elias Coffee House and Ministries, and my introduction to serving coffee and serving people in the Northeast. So yeah, he's a Calvary grad and a great brother in the Lord and a great ministry partner. We continued to office there. Dan really helped us to get RefugeKC off the ground December of 2015, as we just even recognized the need to have a distinct and an intentional ministry to refugees being resettled right there in our neighborhood, right around Elias.
Well, thank you, thank you. In fact, I'd like to talk to. Maybe we could have a live conversation from Elias Coffee House sometime, and talk to Dan. But let's dive into this refugee issue. And let's take this in reverse order. So let's talk about the refugee issue, then let's talk about RefugeKC and how what you all are doing about this issue. So first of all, let's start with what is a refugee, and why are they coming to America, and is it really a crisis?
Okay, well. So on one hand, I mean, I would love to just kind of anchor this, if we could, into just even the history of our nation. I mean, you've probably heard it said that we are a nation of immigrants, and then unless one of us is full-blood Native American, we had to immigrate to this country, and so that really is the case. There's a lot of truth to that. We are a nation of immigrants, and of course that we've really seen waves of immigration taken place even since the initial, founding of our country in 1776, or whether it was the Irish potato famine that sent Irish over, or jumping more recently, the Vietnam conflict, the end of the Vietnam War that sent so many of the original, at least original in my lifetime, boat people fleeing from Vietnam into any other country that would accept them. And of course, the United States accepted a lot of them. Jumping out of order, but a little bit before, in this neighborhood, of course, you had the Italian influx. So many Italians, that are now remembered for organized crime, and great Italian restaurants, and a lot of other things like immigration services, like Don Bosco, that they started to help immigrants, be resettled here. But getting most recently, the current refugee resettlement program started in its current form in 1992. And so there was some big years, of several thousand coming into the United States, of course, dispersing throughout the major cities. But the one that, since my involvement goes back to 2011. 2011, when we came back from Thailand here to the Northeast, and began to just meet some of these refugees that we had heard about. We definitely knew the Northeast was known for its diversity, and as we met and befriended them, we of course learned more of the human face and the human side of this current crisis. So I think if you ask them, it's probably a crisis, right? Because they're displaced from their homes and have to come around to the idea that they're never going back. That they, once they're resettled here, they might go back for a visit, but they will live and die in a strange land. At least this first generation. That's how you have to figure they see things, and then of course they see their children. Many of them born here, becoming a kind of a third culture as they mix in with the American culture and become something different than their first nationality, their first culture.
So Rich, you're talking about this resettlement program. I'm not sure whether most Americans even really are aware of it, but really there is a technical difference, right, between an immigrant and a refugee. Isn't a refugee fleeing violence and war?
That's
and other
right.
things?
That's right. So I have the technical definition just based on international law. Even it defines a refugee as a person outside their country of his or her nationality who is unable or unwilling to return to that country because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution, that's based on their race, religion, nationality, or membership into a particular social group or even a political opinion. So yeah, they become a refugee when they step outside of their country of birth, as they're fleeing persecution, death, or threat of persecution and death. So
Yeah,
So the
terms are kind of thrown around. So I just wanted to clarify, like, there isn't like a legal immigrant who comes and goes through the whole process and gets all the right papers and everything. Then there's the illegal immigrant, if you will, who sneaks across the border or whatever. And then there's the refugee who comes here literally fleeing for their lives. And so this is a really important clarification in my view. So generally speaking, and not just talking about Americans now in general, but what does the church, what do American Christians, because this is actually a global crisis. I read stories about refugee resettlement in all kinds of different places around the world. But here in America, let's look at least your perspective of how the church in America is doing. Generally speaking, what do most American Christians kind of misunderstand about this issue? And what maybe do we get right? What are we not getting right?
Yeah, well, to kind of go back to your point to some degree, we as humans, we do want to define our terms well, and we have this desire to be able to know and kind of get a grasp on things. So being informed is very important, but the definitions will ultimately begin to kind of mesh because we're talking about humans here, right? So with refugees, it's estimated that there are currently right around 27 million refugees that are just, their lives are just on pause, if you will, or in upheaval because they're in these camps in places like Turkey. Of course, those that flee from Southeast Asia, from Myanmar, or what used to be called Burma, are fleeing into Thailand or making it to Malaysia or even Indonesia. So their lives are kind of just thrown up in the air at this point because they know they're transient. They know that they're passing through those countries, that they're not welcome to stay in a lot of cases in those particular countries. So they're awaiting resettlement. So 27 million. Well, if you add internally displaced people or people that are just trying to make a go or figure it out within their country, whether it's war-torn Syria or Myanmar or Democratic Republic of the Congo or Sudan or Somalia, all these countries that are experiencing turmoil and conflict, then that number goes up to like 65 million plus. So that means 65 million people have fled their physical homes because of war, because of bombs falling on their shelters, their dwellings, and they're trying to figure out where home is going to be and where they can find a refuge. We love that word that we've named the nonprofit ministry after. So we know that God is our refuge and our strength, and so we are just trying to do what we could do to welcome them into our city, because they are coming to a strange land and to a strange language and a strange culture. And having lived overseas in Thailand, we know a little bit about what that's like. And so we just really had a heart to welcome them. And of course, the bigger picture is welcoming them not just into our city, but welcoming them into the kingdom of God, that introducing them to Jesus, the one who will lead them into the kingdom of God.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really the right perspective. So do you know how many refugees there are in the United States? And I heard someone say recently, I didn't verify it, but I'm just curious whether you've heard this, is that the United States takes in more refugees every year than any other country in the world. Have you heard that?
I have. Yes, exactly. Correct. So the U.S. has been known for its acceptance of a good deal of the refugee population that's awaiting resettlement since 1992. Of course, they would have a record even before that, again with other dispersions of people. And so, it's only been most recently that at least the refugee resettlement numbers have begun to shrink. And now we're just waiting to see, what happens, especially with the unique case, right, that we have refugees on our southern border. And again, the human face of this really does mix in the different terms, but I have learned firsthand that some of our refugees that normally would be resettled through the legal refugee resettlement process have made their way to our southern border through yeah, a lot of difficult travel to request entry into the United States as an asylum seeker. Um, and so some of them have been granted that. So we welcomed some guys from Eritrea, Eastern Africa, who made that trek all the way to our southern border, and then were granted to come into the United States as asylum seekers.
It's just a tough issue, isn't it, Rich? I mean, on the one hand, you can't really take everybody. I mean, you can't take all refugees and all immigrants, but at the same time, I think Americans generally are a very generous people, and we we want to help people, especially people who are fleeing danger and war. So it's just a tough issue, isn't it?
It is, yeah. There is ample, biblical admonition from Genesis to Maps, right, about welcoming the stranger in our midst, about welcoming the sojourner to the Jewish nation. They were admonished to welcome the alien and stranger, to welcome the foreigner among them, because, and it always goes back to, because you were foreigners too, because you were like this in Egypt. And so, and then all the way up to of course, to the New Testament, where Jesus said, when you welcomed the least of these, you welcomed me. Matthew 25, he's talking about, when you did it for the least of these, you did it unto me. So yeah, we would believe that would be a biblical command and mandate for all believers, just to err, if you will, on the side of generosity, on the side of welcoming people from these other countries. But yeah, in terms of how many and what kind of limit is placed, that goes on up, way above my job description or role, all the way up to the Lord. Of course, God knows how many, but the State Department, the powers that be, they do try to work through that, in the sense of thinking about how many can we welcome.
Right.
For better or worse, I tend to think, because I am a Roe v. Wade baby, I survived Roe v. Wade. When you murder 65 million U.S. citizens, I think we've got plenty of room, especially when you start thinking about how many children and grandchildren those 65 million U.S. citizens would have by now.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think a lot of Christians do, and I think rightly so, in many cases, get wrapped up in and try to be informed on the political side of this, and like you say, really it's above our pay grade or whatever. We don't get to decide, right? We can't
Right.
decide. We can't. We're not the ones who decide how many refugees and really immigrants in total are let into the country. Um, so so let's bring it down to, all right, they're here, they're coming here, and they're going to continue to come here. How should the church respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, becoming aware of the biblical, just precedent of welcoming this stranger, I think is going to go a long ways of helping people to have compassion, and as much as they can to listen to the stories of the people that are coming, and to reach out, personally, to do what they can do to get to know their own neighbors. I know it's a time of we're tempted to be increasingly isolated from one another, just the lives that we lead, to be more online with people and not face to face with them, to see people more as strange and as different, and as maybe of another opinion or ideology of us than we hold or have. And so, yeah, just being careful of that, being careful of the fear of the unknown. They are different than us. They're coming from different, obviously, nationality, language, culture, religion, all of these things. But yet, if we begin to see the similarities, um, then that's when God really works, and we do well to remind ourselves that these are people that are created in the image of God, just like we are, and they have intrinsic value just because of that. Because God has created them in His image, He's created their culture, He's created their language, and ultimately, according to Acts 17, He determines the boundaries and habitations of every man, woman, and child who has ever lived or ever will live. And so God is bringing them here. And so let's join Him in His work of seeing them brought into the kingdom, or brought to know the King of Heaven, so that He might lead them into His kingdom.
That's good. So you're basically saying, let's rise above the political issues, and even, really, again, those are some of those things we can't really change, but we can rise above those political issues, and we can think of this with a kingdom mindset, and just basically say, God, what do you want us to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is where RefugeKC came from. So tell us about how RefugeKC began, and what exactly you're trying to do.
Yeah. And one more thought before I forget. Just like in the Old Testament, God really admonished the Jewish people to think about their past when it came to welcoming the stranger. You were strangers and aliens in Egypt. I would say that's true. We think about who we were before Christ, but then also I think we have to consider our future, that there will come a day when our country is not at all friendly to us as believers. And I believe there will come a day, if not in my lifetime, in my son's, where he has to be a refugee in another country because of his faith, because he knows and loves and follows Jesus as the Messiah. And that's not going to be popular in the United States. So I would say, you think about your future when you have to run, when you have to flee, when you have to seek a refuge in another country. And so welcome the stranger as you would want to be welcomed. It sounds a tad bit like Jesus, I hope. When He said, love the Lord your God with your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And
do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah, that's right.
I forgot who said that.
Yeah. But, and when it comes to the parable of the Good Samaritan, I mean, the reason why that guy goes unnamed, we know it's a Samaritan that helped him. We assume that it was a Jewish person, but it's like, insert your face here. I mean, could there be a bigger, example of Jesus saying, put your face here, this person who's been beaten and left for dead, and then do to them what you would pray to God, that you would want someone to do for you when you were in that position. So
good. I think maybe I've beaten this horse enough, but I do think that there are important political issues here, and good people disagree, and I think those are important, but really, just like so many other things, and this is what I hear you saying, is we have to rise above it. We have to think. We have to have Christ's perspective on this issue, like so many others, and move forward with just kind of an adventurous spirit, saying, okay, God, this is the way things are. Let's, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to respond? So I just think that's probably really the starting point for us as the church and as Christians when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, that's right. So with the start of RefugeKC, it was really just as I was working behind the counter there at Elias, one of the first friendships I made, close friendships with a refugee, was right outside Elias's entrance on the corner there of Indiana and Independence Avenue, and it ended up being a Karen neighbor sitting in his wheelchair. He had lost his legs when he was working and was in an accident in Thailand. And so as I tried to engage him in conversation, I found that the only language we were able to speak together was Thai. So he was from the Karen tribe, but had worked and lived in Thailand. And so he spoke conversational Thai. And so in that moment, God kind of just redeemed that piece of my life, having lived and served in Thailand for a number of years and having learned the language. So that became a language of connection and continues to serve in that way for some of our new American neighbors, some of our refugee neighbors who fled into Thailand and learned the language. So yeah, it wasn't too long after that, number of years maybe of working with the Karen people, having Bible studies in this friend's home, in this Karen man's home, Doha, that I recognized just the need to start a ministry that would be solely focused on welcoming refugees into our city and into the kingdom of God.
Beautiful. So, your website, I noticed, it's really a beautiful website, but the first thing you see when you go to the RefugeKC website is welcoming the stranger among us. And obviously there are many ways that we can do that. In fact, we would certainly encourage our listeners to begin by looking for the strangers, if you will, the refugees who may be in our own neighborhoods or working where we work or wherever they could potentially be all around us, right? But what specifically how specifically can people get involved with RefugeKC?
Yeah, well, would love for people to visit the website, and there are some options there to connect with us, even just dropping us an email. But we would welcome you to check out a couple of our options, our programs. We're looking for interns this summer. Usually we take interns that are either college grads or even recently graduated from high school. So kind of the youngest is high school graduates. And then also we do an ESL program during the semester that a lot of folks have become involved with over the years. We hope to see that expanding in the fall, but right now we've been doing a Saturday program for quite some time, most recently housed there at Elias. So 11:30 to or 11 to 1, teaching English as a second language. And people often are fearful that they would need to know another language. Actually, if you just know and love and follow Jesus and speak English, you're a great candidate to be a language partner. It's great if you speak another language, but not at all necessary or requirement or any previous English teaching or teaching experience at all. So we do pair people one-on-one with students just so they can actually get time practicing speaking English with you. Then we have individuals in churches kind of forming into welcome teams to help welcome families, to make a personal connection with them. Often how that starts is just even signing up to pray for them. We have a volunteer process for people to go through, of course, including an application and a background check. But would love to have you help us prepare welcome gifts to welcome families as we go into their homes, to just give them a personalized welcome. That being one of the steps to becoming kind of a full-fledged, what we call an ambassador. We've used a lot of different terms, but we've kind of stuck on this term ambassador. It's a biblical term, also a great example of what we're trying to do to be an ambassador, whether you would see it as from your church or obviously an ambassador of Christ, 2 Corinthians 5, 17 through 21, that you're welcoming that person like an ambassador would into this country, into this neighborhood and into the kingdom of God.
My family participated. I think it was in like a Christmas thing that you do, just kind of bringing gifts to a family, and it was just a great experience for us. Which is another thing I think needs to be highlighted here, is that it's not just Americans giving of their time and resources to refugees. I mean, what we get out of it is kind of the untold story, I think, because this family invited us in and just they were so excited to spend time with us, and they were so grateful for our simple little welcome. There really is a blessing that goes along with this, correct?
That's right. Yeah, we do well to think in terms of parity instead of disparity. And that's hard to do sometimes because for a number of reasons, they do arrive, refugees, with hardly anything in their pockets or in their possessions. Sometimes just a small bag. I don't know if one very practical thing you might do. It's just an interesting movie. It's based in Kansas City. It's called The Good Lie with Reese Witherspoon. So if you check that movie out on Netflix or Amazon, The Good Lie kind of details the story of the Sudanese lost boys. And it does a really good job on a number of levels. It doesn't get everything right, of course, what Hollywood movie does, but it does a good job of telling about their experience in Sudan, in Africa, and why they had to flee and become refugees, and then what they experienced, once they got to America. And it's interwoven in a lot of flashback scenes, I think, in a way that's very helpful to explaining the refugee story. The other thing I would love to just highlight is that there is an upcoming refugee simulation that we're helping recruit for and helping put on, but it's done by a sister ministry called People Teams. And that's going to be Saturday, May 15th, all day, but you sign up for just like 3-hour segments. And so people can get more information by just emailing info@refugekc.org. But those simulations have been just really powerful tools. You kind of step into the shoes of a refugee. Instead of putting, virtual reality goggles on, you're actually stepping into some, similar situations that they walk through, and then, debriefing at the end. So that's a really powerful time.
Give us that website again.
So if you just emailed that you are interested in the refugee simulation or any of these opportunities, you could just email info@refugekc.org.
Okay. And so your website is refugekc.org. Is that correct?
That's right. That's correct. And so that email address is just info@.
Well, Rich, I need to wrap this up. I'm hoping that this is really just the beginning of a conversation for a lot of people, and that we've just piqued their interest, and they're going to visit your website and participate in what you're doing. I so appreciate you coming and sharing your insight on this important issue. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for the church, and I also I really want to believe that there are a lot of Christians out there who are saying, I'd like to help, I just don't know how to do that. So hopefully they can now connect with you guys and begin that kind of a ministry. God bless you for what you're doing and for welcoming refugees to Kansas City. And definitely when somebody does take that vote for most awesome people in Kansas City, you're going to get my vote. And maybe Vicky will, if I ever, get to meet her. But anyway, if you're listening, thank you so much for listening to Calvary Conversations with our guest, Rich Casebolt, and myself. I hope you've been challenged today to welcome the strangers near you. And so again, if you want more information about RefugeKC, refugekc.org, not .com, right? It's .org.
That's right.
All right. And thanks again, Rich. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Grace and
peace. Me on today.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Calvary Conversations, a service of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. We invite you to participate in the conversation by contacting us through the Calvary University website, calvary.edu, or by calling us at 816-322-0110. Join us again next week for another Calvary Conversation.